Pedalboard Tetris got you down? We've all been there. You love your effects pedals, but you only end up in a tangled mess of cables and a bank account that's crying. Today, we are looking at something that Boss claims can replace that entire monstrosity. We are going to look at and put to the test the Boss ME-90. They're promising an entire guitar rig in one big box, but most importantly in a streamlined and easy to use format that will remind us inevitably of our good old amps and effects pedals. So as always, let's start with the deep dive of this bad boy. If any of you guys are familiar with the Boss products generally, the build quality is, as always, number one. Well done, Boss, on that. If we look at the front of the unit, this is what got me really excited. This is what I love. A knob per function. No menu diving. No engineering degree required. This basically is a massive pedal board, and it's done very, very logically and very well. What you'll find is the first section up here has your preamp models. So you get a total of 11 preamps ranging from your normal low gain stuff, even the natural one, going to full blast high gain with a 3-band EQ and an overall level and gain. Then moving on, first in your effects chain, you've got a COM FX1 area. So this is where you generally put your compressor or your EQ, whatever you want. If you want to put it at the beginning, you can put an octave, you can put a wah, whatever you want. And that's controlled with this section. So essentially, if you want, these are done very logically by sections, which is cool to see. Moving on, second in your chain, you want an overdrive or distortion section. And here again, it goes from very clean boost to a tube screamer to a fuzz, distortion, whatever you want. They give you a nice variety of overdrives and distortion. And again, controlled by this foot switch here. After that, moving in our chain, we go to the modulation effects. So you have your standard, and it's very, very complete. Everything from phasers, choruses, rotary, harmony, the whole thing. It is very complete. You've got a ton of effects here that you can, as always, control the length, depth, feedback, etc., depending on what effects. And it's controlled by this section here. Then at the top, you've got an EQ2 effects. So this is very, very handy if you want to also use it in terms as an overall EQ to your sound in the effects loop, or if you want to add any time-based delays, anything like that at this point of your signal. Then in your chain, you've got your delay section, which is here. You have a total of 8, 9 different delays. Really, really quite good quality overall, I've got to say. Very, very tweakable. So you've got good sounds in there. Everything from room, tape delay, vintage, the whole lot, reverse even, which is a really cool sound if you like Jimi Hendrix. Very, very cool, and it's controlled. This section, and then finally, as you would, you have a reverb at the end of your chain. Moving on to the final section here, you've got your expression pedal, you have an overall output, you then have all the magic buttons here, which allow you to move, save, go through the various patches, and you have a very tiny digital display, which is the only digital display on this board, and it's really multifunction. So it tells you what patch you're in, your user patches. It tells you what the values of each of the pedals are in, or what position the effect is in the chain. If we quickly take a look at the back, really complete as always with the Boss products. Starting from the left of the unit, you have obviously your input, you have a dual output, so mono and stereo. Then you have your selector switch, depending on whether you're running this into a amplifier or whether you're going straight line out into your DAW or whatever, PA, whatever it can be. Following on, you have the phone's input and you have your effects loop, so you can actually add extra pedals if you want to this unit. You then have the ability, at an extra cost obviously, to add the Boss Bluetooth adapter to this, so you can control Tone Studio, etc. via Bluetooth, which is pretty cool, I guess. Not so sure about obviously spending money on an additional kind of dongle to put on this, but hey, everything has a price in life. You then have your USB, which is USB-C, so very cool. They've updated that compared to some of the previous models. Your power on and your DC in. So that's nice and complete. And as always with the kind of Boss pedals and multi-effects, I think they had this also on the original versions of this. This can be powered by batteries as well. In case you're in a gig, something where they don't have a power supply, you can shove some batteries in there. Obviously, it's not going to last particularly long, but it's a cool option that they've included. And it's something, to be honest, that a lot of manufacturers don't even do anymore. So I still like the fact that they've included that in there. So that was a very quick overview of the unit. As you've heard in the beginning of this video and throughout in various places, I tried to give a good representation of what the ME-90 can do in a mix. And we'll definitely talk about my impressions of it in a mix specifically at the end of the video. But now I think it's time to just plug in and see outside of the mix some of the kind of sounds that it can produce and the main ones that I thought would be useful for you guys to hear. So let's do it. Okay guys, I've got my guitar. I'm all plugged in. Basically, I am running my guitar into the ME-90 and then using that as audio interface straight via USB to my DAW, which is Reaper. There's no post effects, nothing going on. Let's start with a fairly clean sound in the Fender Tweed combo, I believe it is. Yep, it's the Fender Tweed combo with very little effects, just reverb, and see what that sounds like. Let's now put a bit of overdrive with the Centaur. Okay, let's now move on to a more Marshall, so we're in the Brit stack. Let's put a bit of overdrive on it with a Tube Screamer. let's go a little more metal, shall we? Let's go to the, high gain X amp and put a little distortion on it. Let's see what it sounds like. Wow, that is very, very bassy. Hang on, let me put the bass down. That is... Finally, let's go natural amp, put a bit of delay and chorus. Let's see what that sounds like. Okie dokie, Lemon Smoky. I hope that was useful for you guys. And I think it's just time to draw up some conclusions. And first of all, let's just talk about the basic question. Who's this for? Who's going to actually use this in a super digital world where everything has a screen and everything is touch screen? Because that's really the elephant in the room here, right? I think whether you like it or not, technology and the use of screens and menus and everything being very touch screen and tactile has changed the way we see things. So if I were to recommend this for a beginner, I probably wouldn't do it, because I've got to say, I don't think it's the most user-friendly for today's generation or a generation of tech-savvy people to use. I actually think the fact that it has no screen or just that tiny screen is actually slightly confusing. You can get lost with all the various choices that you have. So it does give you a little bit of paralysis in terms of you spending tons of time actually tweaking the buttons rather than just pressing on a preset or adjusting it with a finger. So that's one of the things I would just mention from my perspective. My initial reaction is maybe not really the most beginner-friendly product for 2024. However, on the other hand, the advantages of it is really clear to see, I think. It's just in the weight, the shape, the form of it. So if you're a gigging musician, I would feel a lot more comfortable bringing this out than something that I need to rely just on the technology part of it, so the screen part of it, so bending over and doing things with my phone or a screen or whatever it is. So I think the downside, if you're a beginner, is actually the positive side of it. If you're actually an intermediate or a gigging musician or someone who needs something really roadworthy that you can kick around and you don't worry about the screen cracking or the Bluetooth not working, whatever it is. So I think it is a very useful unit for someone who needs to carry around a whole rig to the recording studio, to a rehearsal. You don't want to be carrying around something that is too delicate. This really fits that bill. The third category, which kind of sits in between these two, and I'm really honestly not sure how I feel about this product, is the home recording one. So if you're a guitarist that likes to record at home or that has a home studio and that's their main kind of occupation, or that's the main way they play guitar, then this leaves us with a few questions. There's some positives, but for me, there's also a lot of negatives. It does obviously have the incredible advantage of acting as a USB interface, which is how I've been using it. So you don't need an extra interface in your signal to record to your DAW. It has, as we mentioned, tons of amps, tons of effects. It has the fact that you can control the expression pedal. You can assign it to almost anything you think. And you've got all those effects that maybe you'll use once or twice in a song, but they're all there. So you don't really need to spend money on a pedal that you'll only use 3 or 4 times in your life. So I really do like the fact that it's a very complete unit, that it has very good quality effects on it. But at the same time, it is worth noting that I think in order to get the best of this, or at least personally, I've been playing with this for a week now. In order to get the best of it, I've actually had to download the Boss Studio app on my computer, and I've actually started tweaking everything on the computer rather than on the unit itself. So for me, that's a little bit of a paradox, because for a unit that kind of markets itself as something that is easy to tweak, that is like your effects pedalboard used to be, but then me finding it more comfortable to actually use the program on the computer rather than the dials on here, just, I don't know, feels like it defeats the purpose. I'm really not sure in terms of home recording if this is maybe one of your best choices. We've got to say, this unit, when Boss released it, did generate quite a bit of buzz online, on YouTube, etc. And for a good reason, because it brought back this idea of having knobs rather than menus. It brought back this more tactile feel. As we said at the beginning of the video, the construction is fantastic, so really solid. It's a very professional, good product. It can stand the test of time. You know, I have no doubts that in 10 years' time, they'll still be producing these like they did with some of their older multi-effects, which are still in production and are still selling super well. And the reason is because they're well built, they sound good, and they're very, very professional. If we mention the price, this unit costs about $270, $280, at least here in the UK. And it is a lot of bang for your buck here, because it's, again, very complete, and it does contain a vast amount of amps. As I said, I think it's 11 different amps, tons of effects, and overall, I found the kind of lower gain, more ambient amp models sounded very good. The tweed combo, the twin combo, they all sounded really, really good. So Marshall stack, again, sounded good. These amps all have a very specific character to them, and they are decent in terms of quality. I think the effects are actually slightly better than the amp models. The effects are very, very good in quality. Maybe you can't tweak them as much as you would normally do with a separate effects pedal, but overall, they cover all the bases. You really have an incredible variety of sounds at your disposal. For example, the acoustic simulator, it works really, really well. So if you just want an acoustic track to put in the mix, then you put it on the acoustic simulator here, and it does a really, really convincing job. So very, very versatile product. Now, I've got to say, on the other side, I do have some problems with this unit, and we've touched upon a lot of them during the video, but just as a summary, I think these are things that you have to be aware of before you spend $280 on this, because it is important that you guys know what you're buying. So first of all, if we start with the amps, as I said, they are good quality amp simulations. However, I do believe that it's really not at the kind of top level amp sims that you can get nowadays. I found that overall, especially on the high gain and on the more rock side of things, they just sounded very bassy. The high gain models, I really found that it was very, very difficult, especially with the sound samples that I did in a mix, so with drums and bass. I found very difficult to get them to pop out, to get the guitar to sit properly in the mix. I had to EQ them quite a bit, especially on the low and mid end, just to get it to cut through, because it was just cancelling out with the bass and it sounded really very, very dark. And I think that's overall, even if you put your headphones on and play, I think the high rock stuff is a little bit disappointing. I expected them to be slightly clearer, slightly less fizzy. I understand that obviously they want to add some bass to it to make it sound more realistic, but I am not really sold on the high gain stuff. The lower gain, the clean stuff, very nice. I think, strangely, I like those a lot better. I think they required still tweaking, but slightly less tweaking than the high gain stuff. So the amps for me are slightly disappointing, I've got to say. Overall, I think there is better quality out there in terms of amp simulation. I think if you compare this to the UA-FX Lion, for example, there is, quite frankly, no comparison in terms of amp sounds. Personal opinion, but I think that's the case. The effects, I think most of them were really, really good. I really like them, but there are a few in there that, quite frankly, I personally would not use. For example, the fuzz in the overdrive distortion section, I find sounds terrible. It really does not sound musically pleasing and is not something that I would recommend. Overall, if I have to say, I think the time-based effects are very good quality, but the kind of distortion pedals, the overdrives, I'm not crazy about them. I don't think they sound particularly good in this unit. And again, it needed a lot of tweaking to get it to kind of sound right. As I mentioned, played around with the presets. I downloaded the app. Everything was fairly straightforward to do, but it just kind of defeats a little bit the purpose, in my view, of the unit itself. So even on a kind of theoretical level, I'm unsure about this unit, quite frankly, because I love the idea of it. I love the idea of being able to tweak everything, but I found it took me way too long to go through the various styles, the various parameters, pressing the buttons, not knowing where I was. And so at that point, I'd much rather have a big screen where I can just go through it, and it just visually helps me a lot easier. So overall, it just depends, as I always say, on your personal tastes, on what you intend to use this unit for, on what kind of music you make, etc. These are all things that I just think are important for you guys to know based on my experience of it. This is, again, just my personal experience, but I hope it's helpful to you guys. So going back to our original question, is this the only pedal board you'll ever need? Personally, I'm not sure. It's good, but I'm not wowed by it. I'm slightly disappointed in some of the sounds. I think it really depends on what you're after. It depends what use you have. As a beginner, I really wouldn't recommend it. If you're a gigging musician and have time to work on the sounds that you want and you have a preference for lower gain sounds, then absolutely, it's roadworthy, it's a good unit, powered by batteries, sounds okay. But generally, I'm really not sure about this unit. I'll be honest, I think there are maybe slightly better choices out there. It's solid, it does a lot of things. I'm just not sure that all those things as a package actually work together. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I do really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting the channel. I will put all the links to the Boss ME-90 in the description below. But you know what? I was just thinking, maybe I actually like the 10-year-old, 11, 12-year-old Boss GT1 more than this. If you want to check out that video, it's somewhere here.